Hello, I am Dr. Jan, and welcome. Welcome to Life After Trauma with Dr. Jan. On this channel, we talk honestly about the trauma and drama of domestic abuse, a painful reality that far too many people suffer through in silence. For 42 years, I lived through things that I never told anyone about: physical violence, the emotional abuse, the verbal attacks, and gaslighting. And I never told a soul, not even my family. But those days of silence are over. This channel is a place where we can talk, share, and heal. I am 86 years young, a survivor and overcomer, not once, but twice. And people often say to me, Jan, you don't look like where you've been, what you've been through. But trust me, I've been to hell and back. And now I'm here to help others find freedom, healing, and hope. Today's episode is episode 36, and it's entitled The Phone Call That Changed Everything. Let me ask you a question. Can you imagine a son refusing to go see his dying mother? Not because he couldn't, but because he wouldn't. And then that same son would skip out on his mother's funeral? Well, that's exactly what my first husband did. His name was Vincent. That's not his real name. That's a pseudonym. We just called him that. And on the day of his mother's funeral, there was one seat on the front row that felt heavier than that entire church. It was Vincent's empty seat. The family and I kept looking towards the church doors, hoping and praying that at the last minute, Vincent would come through. I'm going to turn off this light because it is blinking and staring in my eye. But that last moment never came. He never walked through those doors. And in that moment, I said in my heart, I'm done with Vincent forever. But what I didn't know was that God was not done with him. I was married to Vincent for almost 20 years. We met in college. I was 18 years old, fresh out of high school. Vincent was 24 years old, and he was attending college on the GI Bill after returning from the Korean War. Like many of the soldiers who returned from war at that time, Vincent carried emotional wounds that people did not understand at that time, not even doctors. Today, we call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It is a mental health condition triggered by experiencing or witnessing terrifying, life-threatening traumatic events. But back in the late 1950s, no one had a name for it. All I knew was that my husband often seemed angry, unpredictable, and troubled. And when those moods would come down on him, those moods would make him turn violent. And I was terrified of him. I really was. But like many women in abusive homes, I stayed. I stayed because I didn't want my children growing up in a broken home. But one day, something happened. Shook me deeply. My sons were getting older, and they began standing up for their mother. And one day they looked me in my eyes and they said to me, they said words that I will never forget. They said, Mom, I know that you are staying because you don't want us coming from a broken home. But Mom, we've never had a home. We've only had a mess. And if Dad ever puts his hands on you again, he will have to deal with us. Oh my God. In that moment, something inside of me broke and I woke up. I realized something so painful that it just shook me to my core. The home that I thought I was protecting, it didn't exist. I was delusional. My boys knew all the time that we didn't have a home. So I finally did what I should have done years earlier. I took my children and we left. Years passed. Life moved forward. My sons grew up and Vincent, he stayed in that same apartment where I had left him more than 30 years earlier. For all of those 30 years, his life never changed. The same walls, the same anger, the same loneliness. Then one day, his 98-year-old mother became very sick, and she called him and she asked him to come see her in Philadelphia. She wanted to see her son one last time. But Vincent refused. Instead, she called me. Even though I had divorced her son many, many years earlier, she and I still remained close. We had a close relationship. She called me and she cried on the phone and she told me that she was dying. And we both cried. And then she asked me to promise her something. She said, promise me that you and the boys will come to my funeral. And of course, I promised. We prayed together. We cried together on the phone, and then we hung up. Weeks later, she passed away. At the funeral, the church was full. Family was gathered, but there was one empty seat on the front row that remained empty. It was Vincent's seat. The organ began playing softly. The service began, and still no Vincent. And for me, that was the last straw. I said in my heart, I am finished with that man, Vincent, forever. After the funeral, my sons and I flew back home. And I thought the story was over. But God had something else in mind. A few days later, I felt something in my spirit that shocked me. The Lord whispered, "Call Vincent." And I said, "What?" And then the Lord said something even more unbelievable. He said, "Call Vincent and tell him about Jesus." I almost laughed. I said, "Lord, you must be joking. Uh, you want me to witness to a man who broke his mother's heart and then skipped out on the funeral? Oh, no, 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 Lord. No, Lord, no. I love you, Lord, but I can't do that." And for weeks, I resisted calling Vincent. And the more I resisted going to that phone and calling, the heavier my heart became, the sicker I became. And no, I didn't go to the doctor because I knew what it was. I needed to make that phone call. And so finally, maybe 5 or 6 weeks later, I picked up the phone and I dialed the number. As the phone rang, I secretly prayed that Vincent wouldn't answer. But on the second ring, Vincent picked up. My throat went dry and tightened. You see, I had not planned for what I was going to say to Vincent. And then something amazing happened. God took over. And for the next 2.5 hours, I told Vincent all about the love of Jesus Christ. Occasionally, he would ask me a question, and the Lord gave me the exact answer to respond to his question. Finally, I asked him one important question. I said, "Vincent, would you like to invite Jesus Christ in your life?" And then I braced myself for the rejection because I had asked Vincent this during the 20 years that we were married, but he always pushed me off and he always rejected me. And therefore, I braced myself for his rejection. But instead, I heard him whisper, "Yes." Right there over the phone, Vincent prayed the prayer of salvation after me. I asked Vincent, "Do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Would you repeat after me and say, 'I confess with my mouth the Lord Jesus, and I believe in my heart that God has raised him from the dead'?" And Vincent repeated those words. And then I said, "For with the heart man believeth unto righteousness, and with the mouth confession is made unto salvation." And then I said, "Did you know that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son to die on the cross for you? Do you believe that?" And Vincent said, "I believe." And then I told Vincent that according to the Bible, you are saved. Because the Bible says in Romans 10, chapter 13, that all who call upon the Lord shall be saved. And I said to him, "Vincent, you are saved. And when you die, you are going to heaven. And suddenly, Vincent began to sob. I don't mean cry. He began to sob, gushing tears of crying. And all of a sudden, his anger was gone. The rage was gone. And he said to me, Jan, I feel so light. I feel as light as a feather. Then he said something to me that I never expected him to ever say. He began to ask me to forgive him for all the things he had done to me during those almost 20 years of marriage. And I told him something that surprised him. I said, Vincent, I forgave you a long time ago. And on that phone call, we both laughed and cried together. From that day forward, Vincent changed. I asked him, did he have a Bible? And he said no. So I sent him one in the mail. And when he received the Bible, he said, excuse me, I don't understand this book. Could you teach it to me? And I said, yes, I would. And for the next 10 years, we studied the Bible together over the phone once a month. For 10 years, he called me the last Sunday of every month. And we studied the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Vincent memorized over 250 scriptures. And to this day, I have still just memorized a few. Neighbors who once, who once feared him, now saw him differently as a different man. And many of them would ask him in the barber shops and other places, they would ask him, man, you have changed. What happened to you? And Vincent would just say, I met Jesus. And I would like to introduce him to you too. Vincent rebuilt his relationship with his sons and with his granddaughters, and he truly became a new man. Years later, when Vincent passed away in 2017, my sons and I flew across the country to bury him. But this time, we weren't burying the angry man we once knew. No, we were burying someone else, a man redeemed by God. You know, Vincent's story taught me something I will never forget. It taught me that no one is too far gone, so far gone, that God cannot reach them. And no one is too angry, too bitter, too violent, not even the person who hurt you. But I also want to say something that's very important. If you are living in an abusive relationship, in a situation that is dangerous, I want you to know that God does not want you to stay in harm. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to do what I finally did, is to leave and to protect your children and yourself. God cares about your safety, and God cares about your healing. And here is what Vincent's story proves. It proves that forgiveness does not mean forgetting. And forgiveness means just letting God do what only God can do. What looked impossible to me was possible with God. Now, if my testimony meant something to you, if it touched your heart, I invite you to go deeper with me. I want you to go to my website, which is www.jmbministries.org. And on my website, I have written a book entitled Testimony of a Kept Woman, From Misery to Ministry Instead of the State Penitentiary. It is an ebook. There are other things on my website that might be of interest to you, but order that book and read it. I think it will make a great difference in your life. Many have, and they said that book has changed their life. But remember, my website, www.jnbministries.org. And remember, trauma may be part of your story, but it does not have to write the ending to your story, because with God, healing is possible. I am a living witness. This is Life After Trauma with Dr. Jan, and I want you to be sure to subscribe, like, and share my channel. Thank you so very much for listening, and I'll see you the next time. God bless you.